Are you someone who has just picked up Darius and is looking to improve very quickly at him? Or are you an experienced veteran who's just looking for a way to fill some gaps within their knowledge base? Whoever you are, this video contains everything that you need to know in order to play Darius like a high elo one trick. What is going on, everybody? My name is Roku and I make the Darius content that you need to crush your ranked games. Now, before we get into the guide, I'd like to make a quick introduction of myself. I am very experienced on Darius. I've been playing this game since Season 7, so that's pretty much 3 years of me non-stop playing nothing but Darius. I have 2.5 million mastery points on him. And unlike some of these other people who have 50 billion mastery points but are super hard stuck, I am a high elo player. I've been to every single elo possible, and I know how Darius is supposed to be played at every single elo. And yes, even the high elo, Challenger, Grandmaster, and Master. I'm not saying all this to brag about myself. I'm saying all this to make sure that you understand that I know what I'm talking about. I'm not some hard-stuck gold or some hard-stuck platinum player who's telling you how to play the game when they themselves don't know how to play the game. All of the advice that I'm going to be giving you right now has been proven to work in the current meta. So without further ado, let's get into the guide. So first, let's get into the pre-game things, the things that you're going to be selecting before the game starts, so like in champ select basically. First off, the summoner spell choice. A lot of you guys know this, but I am a very strong advocate for Flash and Ghost. There is no other setup other than Flash and Ghost. Run Flash and Ghost. Sorry for repeating it 3 times by now, but it's kind of, I've already made a video about why Ignite is bad, but it's kind of staggering as to the number of Darius mains who don't run Ghost and Flash, or Flash and Ghost for those of you who put Flash on D, like me. But still though, Flash Ghost is how you play Darius, and if you're not doing Flash Ghost, then you're heavily missing out. So yeah, there is no other way, there is no discussion, go Flash and go Ghost. If you're not using Ghost, it's merely switching to Ghost and learning how to use Ghost will boost your rank without even having to improve at anything else. Alright, let's go to the runes. So for your primary tree, you mostly want to be running Conqueror and a precision tree like this. Conqueror, Triumph. You can pick either Alacrity or Tenacity depending on the enemy team, so Alacrity if you're fighting hard, you want to snowball, and you want to be really strong on split pushes and 1v1s, or Tenacity if you're facing like a high CC comp. So either of these works. And for the last 3, you always take Last Stand. For the secondary tree, the most recommended secondary tree is Sorcery, with Nimbus Cloak and either Transcendence or Celerity. The choice between these does not really matter, it's just preference, but you have to take Nimbus Cloak. The reason this page is so powerful is because it puts a lot of your strength into your summoner spells. And for the seasoned Darius players, you know that you're only relevant in the match when you have your summoner spells. So this makes your strongest moments even stronger, so you can just completely just 1v5 teamfights with your summoner spells with Nimbus Cloak. If you're a bit of a less experienced Darius player, or you're just not that confident, you're free to run Resolve. Now with the Resolve secondary tree, you can pretty much take anything except for these 2, right? So you have complete freedom to adapt against your enemy team. You can go Demolish, Conditioning, if you're up against a super easy lane, like a tank lane, like a Scion. If you really don't need the extra stats in lane, you can go for Bone Plating and Demolish if you're up against like a tough laner, like Renekton or Jax, where you need the Bone Plating, but after you beat them, you can snowball super hard with Demolish. If you're against like a super difficult to fight range matchup, you can go Second Wind and Unflinching if they have CC, you know, Overgrowth if you want the extra health, just whatever, you know. It's all possible with Resolve, but I recommend that you learn how to use Ghost and learn how to use Sorcery. The last page we'll be talking about is with Phase Rush. Now with Phase Rush, like, you go like this setup, like you have to take Phase Rush, you have to take Nimbus Cloak. Either of these works, they're both equally irrelevant, but at least they work for you, and it's not as useless as Absolute Focus. And for these 3, you can pick any of them because they're all just absolutely worthless. I tend to go for Scorch or Water Walking myself. Secondary tree, you have to go Precision because playing Darius without Triumph is incredibly difficult, and some attack speed or tenacity depending on the enemy team. So this setup you want to be running into specific matchups, right? So I'm talking Nasus, Jace, sometimes Kale. You might even run it into Trinomir if you're having trouble with a matchup, right? This is only good into specific matchups, and if you don't want to know which matchup specifically it is good into, you can go into my Darius guide, and for every single champion I write which keystones works best against them. Alright, so that's all the pre-game stuff taken care of. Now let's get into the game and show you how to sort of play Darius in the moment. Now let's get into the in-game stuff. The maxing order, I'll leave it on the screen somewhere, but it's basically Q, then E, then W. Q, E, W. Now some Darius players max W second, and that is just wrong, right? Oh, W gives me more damage every time I level it up. Yes, that is true. But on the other hand, E also gives you more damage because it gives you armor pen, and it also lowers the duration of the cooldown of your most powerful abilities, so you really need E as much as possible. And another extra thing is that the more you level up E, the lower the mana cost. So we know that Darius has a lot of mana issues lately, so lowering down the mana cost of E is very vital to Darius, especially now, right? So Q, then E, then W, and of course level ultimate whenever you can, right? Leveling order aside, there are 3 possible starts for you level 1 to take: Q start, W start, or E start. Let's start off with like the least viable out of all these 3, the E start. You want to be starting E where you're going for an invade with your team, right? So let's say you're invading here, your team has no other hook, then you just go E and try to hook for them. This is very risky because if you get a kill, it's nice, but if you don't get a kill, you suffer the consequences of having E first, which is your early laning is complete dog shit. Level 1 without your Q or your W, you can't really fight back that effectively, so yeah, E is just not useful that much level 1, right? Let's talk about the W start. The W start is for lanes where you're up against melee champions that don't outrange you. So you're not going to start W into Aatrox, you're not going to start it into Mordekaiser, you're not going to start it into Jax because you can just Counter-Strike or block it. You're going to start it only into champions who have to be near a melee range to do anything to you. Talking Irelia, some tanks, etc. Garen, a W star can work fairly effectively into Garen. You know, it all depends on what character you're up against. Now, if you want to cheese someone, don't hide in these 2 bushes like a peasant. You know, you have to hide in one of these 2 bushes. Because remember, if your enemy is leashing their jungler, they're going to have to walk up here, through this bush, to the lane. Or if they're leashing here, they have to walk through this bush to their lane. So, if you're like on here, on this side, right? Like the enemy is leashing their jungler here, sit in this bush, start your W, and then, you know, try to take as much of your HP as possible. If their jungler is like starting blue buff, then just kill them in this bush as they walk to the lane. Now, this won't always work into more intelligent players because they're going to be like, oh, Darius level 1 is very powerful, so I'm just going to walk around. And that's completely fine if it doesn't work. We're just cheesing, and you don't really lose that much from cheesing anyway. The most viable and your most standard start is your Q start, which helps you get the first 3 minions, it lets you poke in lane, and though it's not the most powerful for all-ins, it lets you like against the Mordekaiser, if he hits you with a Q, you can hit him back with another Q instead of being like not in range to deal with damage to him because you did the W start. So Q start is better into laners that can outrange you, like Aatrox, Mordekaiser, and etc. Let's talk briefly about items. I've released a far more in-detailed item guide that I'll be putting up into a card somewhere through some YouTube magic, but let's just I'll just give you a quick TLDR, right? For starting items, for most part you should ignore Rejuve beads because this is a tiny bit more tricky to pull off, because when you're running Rejuve bead, you have to make sure that you don't fight your enemy laner in an all-in at all unless they severely fuck up, because Rejuve bead gives you no stats for an all-in. It's only good for lanes like Cassiopeia, Teemo, etc., where all you're doing is just taking damage. And if you're a lower elo player, chances are the Teemos down there are garbage, so you're just better off with D-Shield, right? So let's get into these 2 items. So, Doran's Blade. This is into melee matchups, for the most part. Like, a lot of these easy tank matchups, you take D-Blade because you just want to crush them as much as possible. If you're up against big, beefy bruisers like Renekton, Jax, Kled, that you have to just beat through raw stats, the D-Blade is your ideal start. But if you're against a range matchup, if you're against a matchup that you struggle against, or you're just not that confident, D-Shield is the way to go. And D-Shield honestly works into all matchups, you know? There are some matchups that D-Blade is better for, but D-Shield runs good into all matchups. So if you're not sure, and if you don't want to look at my guide, just run D-Shield and you should be good to go. If you find yourself needing potions a lot in fights, you can go refillable potion and just have it there to give you the extra regen you need in closer fights. I build it a lot, and I honestly use it as a crutch at this point, because, you know, I just have 150 gold, I might as well get it to give myself a little bit of a boost, right? And it sometimes has saved my life, so refillable potion is purely up to your preference. I do it almost every game at this point. Now for vision, right? For vision, like, you're gonna start with yellow wards naturally, because what other choice do you have? And after the laning phase is over, you almost always want to be upgrading to Oracle Lens or Farsight Alteration. You have to get one of these. Like, it's just a must, right? Because this can help you like deny vision to your enemies, and the Farsight Alteration can help you see objectives for your team. Like, let's say you have no vision for Baron, you do the blue ward on it, and you see if the enemy's doing it or not, right? So I have a way more like detailed breakdown of wards and vision on Darius. I'll leave a link to it up there in a card somewhere. Click on it for more breakdown on what you should be doing with vision. But for now, we're going to go on with our items. So on your first few backs, here are some early rush options, right? Now Phage is one of your most frequent early rush items, and you need to go this item most of the time if you get fed, if you're ahead in lane, and you just don't need extra resistances to survive in lane, right? If you get a kill or something, go Phage, go into your Phage item, right? But if you're not fed and you need to still tank up for your lane, you can go for the other options. Ninja Tabis, it works great into Jace, Jax, Renekton, all these sort of big auto-attacky bruisers and shit. It also works really, really well into AD range top laners. Spectre's Cowl, you're going to be going this into Teemo, Cassiopeia, and these, you know, pokey, annoying AP matchups, like Rumble if you're having trouble with him, right? Once you get Spectre's Cowl, you just automatically win the lane against Rumble, unless you've died like 50 times. Mercury Treads is not that useful. You mostly want to be going this into AP matchups that have annoying CC, right? So Kennen and Ryze come to my mind, but anything that has like CC that's annoying you, you go Mercury Treads. Bramble Vest, I'm gonna be real with you, it mostly just works into Fiora, just Fiora, but if you're up against any Bork abuser like Jax or Renekton, you should go Ninja Tabi and Bramble Vest. Executioner's Calling is for those healers that don't necessarily like auto-attack you, so basically Vladimir or Aatrox if he does not auto-attack you, but most Aatrox players will, so you can go Bramble Vest into him. So yeah, that's it for the early rushes. Let's get into our core. You have to pick either Triforce or Cleaver. I have a full breakdown of this, but Triforce is if you're fed, if there are like very low amounts of attacks on the enemy team, and if you just want to split push and if you want to carry, right? Cleaver is more so if you want to play with your team. It's more so if you're feeding, because when you're feeding, you don't have the money for Triforce. And it's also if the enemy has like 2 or more tanks. You might also want to get Cleaver or Triforce if you're running into trouble with like a tank matchup. So like if you're dying to a Malphite or if you're dying to an Ornn, which should not really happen, but if it happens, Volibear, then you go Cleaver, right? Always, 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 always run Sterak's Gauge after your first item. Always. No other exception, right? Unless you're just completely inting, like completely inting, and have no way of being relevant, then you can go full tank. Alright, so those are your core items out of the way, so we're assuming you have one of these, Sterak's Gauge, and your boots item. Next, you want to go for your tank items, right? Don't go for extra damage, right? The only extra damage you can get is either Death Stance or GA, but I'll get to those later, right? So for all these items, Gargoyle Stoneplate is probably the most powerful one, right? Because it lets you tank up, like really like a lot in team fights, which is one of Darius' problems, just surviving against heavy burst. It gives you both armor and magic resist, and it has a very, very nice build path, and it's very cheap, right? So great item, but if you don't like using it, then that's fine, you can just go with the rest of the tank items. Spirit Visage works extremely well with Darius, and it also happens to be one of the few good magic resist items in the game, right? Get this when you're up against magic damage users and you're getting trouble with a lot of these mages. Randuin's Omen, it's probably like the best AD tank item in the game. It's better than Deadman's because Deadman's is more so for the speed, but if you just want to get as tanky as possible, go Randuin's Omen. And as a double bonus, it's also the hard counter to crit characters. So Tryndamere, Yasuo, Yone, and a lot of these ADCs like Caitlyn, who's very meta right now, you go Randuin's, and you take a lot less damage from them. Thornmail is an item that you should only go for if you've already built Bramble Vest sometime in the game, right? Because Thornmail does not really offer you anything as an item, right? Randuin's is way better than Thornmail in almost every single way, so only get it if you already have Bramble Vest. Dead Man's Plate is, like, it used to be one of the most powerful tank items for Darius, and now it's just kind of like, it's kind of overshadowed by Randuin's, because the Randuin's just makes you a lot more tankier. Dead Man's is basically the tank item you want to get into games where you bought Randuin's already, or into games where you're this character who has to permanently hold a side lane, right? You always have to clear a side lane, so like you have to move between like parts of the map a lot, and you have to get to objectives quickly. At that point, you want to get Dead Man's Plate. Righteous Glory is an item you want to get if you have trouble catching up to the enemy team in teamfights, if you're just getting kited out very heavily. And that's the only way you want to get this item, because like it just gets heavily outscaled, because this item gives you a lot of damage but not really any armor. Adaptive Helmet works against AP champions like Ryze or Cassiopeia, who do a lot of repeated damage through like single damage sources. You can always pick up a QSS if you're up against a Malzahar, a Warwick, or a champions with like a lot of annoying CC, and you can build up a GA if you're up against a full AD composition and you are fed and you're your team's only hope, basically. Here are some example builds I have, and of course you can get the link to this item set in the description below. Alright, let's get into some of the combos. Okay, so I'm assuming that you can already land your Qs and your Es, because that's the most fundamental skill on Darius. Knowing how to land your Qs and your Es, you know, knowing the ranges of them, that's like the step one of playing Darius. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is resetting your auto attack timer with your W. You see how there's like a timer between auto attacks? If you auto attack and then press W instantly, you can auto attack faster, like this. Right? See how that's a lot faster than just waiting for 2 auto attacks? So you almost always want to be using your W with an auto attack before it, right? Like auto W, like that. The one situation where you should not use this is if you're against someone who has a lot of mobility, because then they can just dash out of your range, so you really need to get that W as soon as possible on them, right? If you're flashing on an Ezreal who can dash away, you don't have a time for auto W, just do W, right? So that's for champions who can get away, but normally do auto W in lane and etc. The second thing we're going to learn is to cancel your W animation with your Q. That's how you do it quickly, but I'll break it down for you right now. This is the normal speed, but the animation cancel is basically you press W. When the Darius starts his auto attack animation with the W, you press Q. Right? Just as it starts, you press Q and he does both of them. See how this target has 2 stacks on it, even though the animation of the W didn't play? See, that's like the animation cancel. So this is a very powerful combo that you can use a lot. Let's put the 2 things we learned together. Auto, W, Q. Right? We learned that, right? Resetting the auto attack timer with auto W, and then canceling the W animation with Q. So let's put it together. That's the basic poke combo that you're going to use in lane a lot. And this is going to be the most useful combo because these 2 abilities have low mana cost. So you can basically spam this tiny combo like fairly frequently in lane. Alright, a tiny mechanic that most players don't utilize is the slow on the E. So when you pull, this character is slowed for 1 second, right? So you can use that to add an additional auto attack to your combo. So the way the combo works right now, all the things we learned is pull, auto, they're slowed, and after the slow you do auto, W, Q. I messed it up, but I'll do it correctly this time. So let's wait for the stacks. E, auto during the slow, auto, W, Q. Right, and then one more auto, and it's like you get your Noxian Might, and then you can either ult them or auto attack them until they get into ult range. One thing that you need to master is using your abilities in conjunction with your flash. So let's say you have your Noxium Might. Let's add it in. So let's say you have Noxium Might here. The skill you need to know is how to do like Q Flash or Flash W and R like that. You know, there's a lot of things that you can do with your Flash. So just make sure you understand the range of your abilities and the range of Flash so that you can do things with it, you know? So yeah. One more thing you can learn how to do is to like buffer your abilities, right? So let's say you're up against a character who can dash away from you. To deal with this, like let's say you flash and you want to ult, right? Let's do it quickly. You see how there's like a few milliseconds of time there for the enemy to react? We don't want that to be there. So what you do is you press R first and then you flash. And so as you can see, the instant Darius got into range, he did his ultimate. You can also do this with auto attacks, with your W, and pretty much anything where you have a target really, right? You can do this with anything. So if you're up against a champion who can, you know, get away from you real quickly, and they're in range to be killed by your ultimate instantly, then do R and then flash in. Another technique is to flash in the middle of your ultimate. So if you think you're gonna die in the middle of your ult animation, just flash away during your ultimate and the ultimate will still go through. Another way you can use this is to basically like assassinate someone, right? So you do your combo, you R, flash, and then you basically do the, like, you R, and then in the middle of your R, you flash to your next target and instantly one-shot them. It will be a lot more clean if I had some attack speed, but I'm doing this without items, so it should be easier if you're practicing it with like Triforce, right? So you get this. Right, it's like a way of one-shotting people, like if you use your flash during your R aggressively, right? You can pretty much do anything with this. Like, it's just what you need for that specific situation. And the last thing we're going to talk about is how you should be using your Ghost. Ghost is very versatile, so you can use it in like a lot of creative ways, but these are the main three like situations where you should use Ghost. Situation number 1, when the enemy mispositions, so you can just run up to them and kill them all the way back, right? So let's say the wave is stuck here, but the enemy makes the mistake of walking towards this side of the lane. So like there's like a lot of way for them to go for safety, right? So you Ghost, you Ghost, you pull them, the combo we learned, and then you auto attack, walk in front of them, auto attack, walk in front of them, and just walk them to the turret and kill them with your ultimate, right? That's the basic running down someone down combo that you do in lane, right? So like you're basically using your movement speed advantage to auto attack them and walk in front of them and then auto attack them again, right? So that they just can't get away. Another situation is in a team fight where, let's say there's a team fight going on here and your team has someone on low HP, so you just run up to them, you find the guy, and then you ult them or whatever and just get the kills, right? And because of how they change Ghost, the Ghost basically does a reset every time you get a kill. It just like extends the duration by 5 seconds. So you can actually do this more reliably now. If there's someone low HP in a fight, just Ghost preemptively, get in there and kill them. The last case where you can use Ghost is when you catch someone, right? Let's say you catch someone in lane or in a team fight, that's when you Ghost and use your Ghost to outplay the opponent or to avoid their damage, basically. You can Ghost after you catch someone like this in lane, in a team fight, basically anywhere, right? Another thing that you can do is if you're up against a very mobile character and you want to make sure that you land your Q, is to do E and Q. So while they're airborne, you press Q and you basically guarantee that you hit your Q on the target. This is very useful into Riven, Irelia, Jax, champions that can just jump into you and avoid your Q, right? And into Jax especially, landing your Q is very important. So yeah, that's it for the Darius mechanics. There's obviously a few more things that I missed out, but this is a condensed video and I don't want this to be 50 hours long. Now let's get into the matchups, right? Now, if you want more information about the matchups, you can go to my Mobafire guide where I have written every single matchup, or you can go into my YouTube channel because I've made some videos about certain matchups that like might be a bit helpful. The first kinds of matchups are like these tank matchups that are super easy to fight, right? You don't really need any additional one-trick knowledge to beat these tank matchups. You just need to land your Qs, land your Es, do your combos, and they all just die the same, right? What is a Scion gonna do against a Darius? Like, nothing. He's just gonna die. Now, the one tip that I can give you about these easy matchups is to try your best to freeze the lane. Try your best to just either slow push and then use the big wave of their turret to use to have a lane priority and do things with your jungler, like in the river, enemy jungle, whatever. Or you can do like a perma freeze. And against these easy champions, they can't really contest the freeze. So because if they just walk up, you just kill them with Ghost, right? So try your best to do like a perma freeze against these easy type of champions, and try your best to not spam Q in lane, right? If you spam Q in lane, even if you hit some of them, you're going to be like perma pushing your wave. And if you always push your lane, you're just going to get ganked and killed, right? So that's why we want to freeze the lane. If you freeze the lane, you're not going to be like ganked as often, because ganking someone who's over here is a lot harder than ganking someone who's like over here, basically. For the bruisers and like the medium matchups like Renekton, Jax, Kled, you kind of have to play around their one key ability, right? Now, it's kind of impossible for me to give you one tip that works for all bruisers, because in this category falls like 50 different types of champions, right? Like you can get two champions that have nothing in common between each other that are in this category, right? So in this medium category, generally you want to be playing around every single champion's power ability, right? What I call power ability is the ability of a champion that allows them to play around you, right? For Jax, his power ability is his counter strike. For Camille, it's her hookshot. For Renekton, it's his slice and dice, or like his dash thing, right? For the Riven, it's her E, obviously, or kind of her Q for damage, but it's mostly her E because it gives her more, gap close. It's just every single one of these champions, for the most part, has a power ability that lets them either go in on your Q or get away from you. You want to be making sure to use your E to cancel that ability, right? So if Jax has counter strike and he jumps onto you, you E and you walk away from him until it's over. If Renekton dashes in on you, you try to use your E to cancel it, or you try to W him during the stun so that he's slowed enough for you to catch up to him, right? You have to make sure that you play around these power abilities, right? Because what these champions want is to go in on your trade and then leave using these power abilities. And if you let them do this too many times, you will die. Now for the difficult matchups, the range matchups, or any matchup that's difficult, like Wukong or Olaf, right? The general idea is to sacrifice CS for your health, right? Because every time you take CS, you're gonna lose a lot of health, and that's not good, right? A lot of high elo players like to show off about CS and etc., but the fact of the matter is you can't always get good CS, right? Like, you're just not in the position to get a good CS. And would you rather be in 100 HP under turret waiting to die, or would you rather be like full health but like 10, 20 CS down, right? It's okay to give up 10 CS, 20 CS, 30 CS, right? As long as you're staying full HP, not dying in lane, right? And the best part about Darius is that he can actually beat a lot of these range matchups in a full-on fight, right? If you're just patient enough, right? Give up the CS that you can't take, just save up your health, they will eventually fuck up, right? And then you can pull them and just beat them like you would any other character, right? Like a Vayne, she's really like annoying, but if you pull the Vayne, RWQ and then Ghost, she can't really get away from you, right? Because like her getting pulled by you means that like she's pretty much dead, right? And I'm assuming that this is in lane and not somewhere else in the game where like, you're both 2-3 items, because then she just outscales you, right? That's how Vayne works. But in lane, you can actually kill Vayne if she fucks up like this. And this applies to all range matchups, right? If they fuck up and they get pulled by you, you can kill them. But in order to like capitalize on this fuck up, you have to understand that like sometimes your health is more important than your CS. If you don't have enough health for this opportunity, you're not going to be able to kill them in the all-in, right? Like, what's easier, killing someone when you're half health or killing someone when you're full health? Obviously when you have full health, right? So try to conserve your health and get the CS that they let you get, right? My general rule of thumb is if you take 80 damage for each CS, then it was kind of worth it, because D-shield and your natural HP regen is going to sustain you back up like for most of that damage, right? But if you take any more damage for one CS, if you take like more than 80 damage for a CS, then it was not worth it at all. Another tactic for difficult matchups is to just wait and CS until you get your first item, right? So like against the Jace or Cassiopeia or whatever, you're not going to beat them early, but if you go back into base, get a Ninja Tabi or a Spectre's Cowl, then you can just kill them if you catch them in an all-in, because you just have the defensive stats to make sure that you survive until you get your 5 stacks and you kill them with your ultimate. So yeah, that is pretty much it for this video, guys. This was kind of difficult to make, but I did it anyway because I just want to make a big overall guide that covers everything, whereas all I've done up till this point is just cover like every single section on its own. This is just covering everything, right? So yeah, follow me on my Twitch, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on all my socials, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.